Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here with you as always. And tonight, we're going to talk a little Jordan Addison returning, also some good news on the injury report and some bad news as well. So we'll get to that, your questions. And then later on this evening, Ahmad Hicks from Fox 9 is going to join for our 9 questions bit, where I ask Ahmad 9 questions and we break it down. And I've got a lot of guests coming on through the rest of the week. I mean, a lot. It's going to be the fantasy show. If you guys have caught that, that's always a fun time. And I've got a first-time guest coming up. Got Andrew Kramer with the Hardcore Breakdown. I've got Andrew Filipponi from Pittsburgh. So all of that is to look forward to in the coming days. But Ahmad will join later on tonight. And I want to start off with the FanDuel question of the day because it relates very closely to the conversation. And that is Jordan Addison over under 42.5 yards on FanDuel for Sunday's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. How many yards and receptions, if you want, do you expect Jordan Addison to get in his return? I would throw it out there that had a pretty darn good return the last time he came back from a short absence against the Green Bay Packers. If I recall correctly, didn't he catch like a 40-yard touchdown on the first drive? So 42.5 is the over-under there. But I think Jordan Addison's return will lead us into a bigger conversation about the Minnesota Vikings offense and just what the expectations are now with quarterback uncertainty, but a lot of the weapons back. Donovan Jackson on the shelf with his surgery, but Darisaw back. And today, the best news of the day for the Vikings on the injury report is that Ryan Kelly practiced in full. And well, I actually thought Michael Juergens, outside of some issues with penalties, did a really good job. It did have one high snap, and I don't think he's ever mastered that entirely from what we saw in training camp. The snapping was an issue at times, and one day they even put Joe Huber in there because I think they got a little frustrated with Juergens and the snapping, but his actual blocking performance, run blocking and pass protection, which was a big concern for a lot of folks during training camp. Do they need a different backup center? Do they need a veteran? And I think Juergens showed that he could go in there and at least hold his own, but he's not Ryan Kelly. He's not a 4-time Pro Bowler. He's not the size of Ryan Kelly. He's not a first-round draft pick. So having him back, at least Blake Brandel gives you an experienced left guard who has played well before in stretches in the NFL, and then Darisaw all-world. So the offensive line is very, very close to being its complete self, although I would say missing Donovan Jackson is unfortunate because of his athleticism adds something different. But getting Ryan Kelly is not only just someone who is large, but also somebody who is very highly experienced, very highly intelligent, to go up against the defense that has a lot of talent on it. Even though it may not have been the best so far this season in Pittsburgh, they've got a lot of skill players there in their front seven, a lot of great defensive line talent that Ryan Kelly will help Carson Wentz, no doubt, block against. But the big story today, we talked with Jordan Addison for a few minutes. Jordan is not the most talkative guy in the entire world, but you could tell from the smile on his face just how excited Addison is to be back in the building. Talked about how important it was the last 2 weeks to be back around his teammates. And he got a chance today for the very first time to work out with his quarterback. So here's Carson Wentz talking about getting to play with Jordan Addison for the first time.
Jordan Addison, I mentioned that today was really the first time you guys got a chance to throw. Just what do you think of him as a receiver? What do you know about him? And then what's it going to be like trying to get up to speed with?
For sure, yeah. This was the first time I've seen him live on the field. And so it's fast and furious. To be honest, a lot of things are still kind of first. And so I'll just throw him into the mix as well. Obviously, I've seen his game from afar. Extremely talented. The way he gets in and out of breaks, just kind of his competitiveness. I've seen that from afar. Now I'm looking forward to seeing that up close and personally. But I know I'm excited to have him back. Everybody else is raving about it, having him back as well. So I think everybody's pretty excited.
Do you guys expect extra practice work like throughout the week here?
As much as you can. There's only so much. At the end of the day, they need to be ready to run on Sunday. So there's only so many extra things you can do on that front. But when we can, we definitely.
There was Carson Wentz there talking about getting Jordan Addison, although it was very interesting to watch Carson Wentz on Sunday throw with anticipation to wide receivers and tight ends that he had never played with before. So I asked him about that today of how is it that you're able to lead wide receivers out of their breaks when you're just getting to know them? And obviously there's a connection there with Jordan Addison where he's never really thrown with him before, just doing it for the first time. In the middle of the week, they have to travel to Europe and still try to get their practice in. And here's what Wentz said.
Wes Phillips was talking about your ability to throw with anticipation. When you've just sort of learned an offense, how were you able to kind of go out there and still do that?
Great question. I think the play calls, the extra time that coaches have put in to help me understand timing, spacing, all the things within this system. There's still a lot of carryover within this system to other teams I've been on. It might be called something different. There might be little nuances and intricacies, but at the same time, throwing into zone versus cover three there's still the same window. So, just understanding the timing and the footwork that the coaches have been super helpful in me understanding since I've got here. That helped a lot, and I think that showed up on Sunday.
Carson Wentz there talking today, and I'll bring you one more, what Kevin O'Connell had to say about how Jordan Addison fits himself back in a receiver room that has added Adam Thielen, along with also having Jalen Nailor.
How much does having him back add pages to the playbook possibly, or does it just unlock things for other guys that everybody bumps out?
Yeah, I think it's probably more so the latter, just from a standpoint of his role clearly, is a role that he's kind of really made for himself over his time here, knowing how versatile and all the things we do with Justin. Jordan's kind of the same way. He can be at any position in our formation. And then that's where I'm really excited about having both Jalen and Adam, to really kind of fuel having, the best group we can have fresh. We can keep the group fresh, specifically with Jordan working his way back in. And that should bode really well for, being able to hopefully play our most consistent game yet.
Is there something about his skill set that's enabled him to be productive regardless of who's been the quarterback, even in college here?
Yeah, I think, he's very, very unique from a standpoint of his route running. His ability to use the tools of our offense, albeit motion, alignment, and stacks and bunches and different variations of how we play. To be able to get on edges, and then he's got such unique separation ability throughout the different levels of routes. He can win early, he can win late, and then he's proven time and time again just how elite catcher of the football he is. So I think that's Jordan. The training camp he had, if you ask me to, figure out the podium of first, second, and third place of the best training camps we had, he would for sure be on the podium.
KOC there on Jordan Addison. I want to point out that in training camp, or maybe it was mini camp, there was a clip of me asking JJ McCarthy about being a thrower of the football, and Rich Eisen used the clip and made fun of my phrasing. He didn't know it was me, but just the question asker. And I just want to point out that Kevin O'Connell says that all the time. So it was clearly in my brain, the catcher of the football, Jordan Addison. Well, he is very good as a catcher of the football. There is no doubt about that. And I think that what you heard there was just how dynamic this offense becomes when Jordan Addison is out there. And while they have survived in years past at times without him, I think when you look at his career numbers, the different places he's lined up, he's been a slot outside. You mentioned all the different types of things. He's been 30% a slot receiver in his career. And I think that shows you that he can line up just about anywhere, do just about anything. His deep numbers are good. His underneath numbers are good. 2 years, 204 targets for Jordan Addison, and almost, just over 1,800 yards, 19 touchdowns. I mean, those are probably top 30 wide receiver numbers to add on to having Justin Jefferson. And the reality is that this group has not given them a whole lot outside of Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. It's also had the wonky quarterback play, a game where you get two defensive touchdowns and you're blowing them out. So the offensive numbers are horrendous when it comes to throwing to wide receivers so far, but they will eventually get into games where you're using the wide receivers a lot more. And I think we're going to see a lot from Jordan Addison. I think it's clear that I would go with the over when it comes to the FanDuel question of the day. But why don't we get into your answers, your thoughts? And the main question for tonight here is, how good can the Vikings offense be? And I think that starts with us using a couple of game sample size of the next 2 weeks where we know that it's going to be Carson Wentz. And then we could talk about what goes on forward and where the expectations should be set. Because when you think about getting a receiver back in the lineup that has 1,800 yards and 19 touchdowns over the last 2 years to go along with Jefferson. And by the way, TJ Hawkinson looked a lot more sharp, I think, when his quarterback was throwing with anticipation and he was seeing him come out of breaks and getting the football to where it was supposed to be. And that was the Hawkinson that we expected throughout really the end of last year, but also at the beginning of this year that had not shown up. And there is always that chicken and the egg thing of, is it the wide receivers not getting open? Is it the quarterback not throwing them open? Is it the chicken, egg, chicken, egg? Because there's 4 or 5 different factors. Is it KOC in the play calling? Is it the protection? Is it the tight end having the chip, which has been brought up, at times? And I think that what we saw last week is how the offense in KOC's vision is supposed to look, but we mostly saw that to wide receiver 1 and tight end 1. But how does that pertain to Jordan Addison and having the full bevy of weapons back with this passing game? And clearly the ceiling is higher when you have Addison there. But as we're trying to figure out what this offense can really be over the next 2 weeks, where it's 2 talented defenses, one's playing amazing, and that's Cleveland. The other has not played well in Pittsburgh, but my goodness, they've got an all-star team worth of guys over there. So you'd think that they would start to figure it out eventually. I think the ceiling for the next 2 weeks is, can you be just good enough and win with your defense? That is where you set the bar when you have a backup quarterback in the game, even if he's been really good before in his career in Carson Wentz, even if he played extremely well. And let's not forget, the defense, yes, did score 2 touchdowns. They ended with 48. They moved the ball incredibly well last week. It was Cincinnati. It was not Cleveland. It was not even Atlanta, who doesn't have a great defense overall, but certainly better than Cincinnati, who struggled over the last few years to put anything together with their roster. And that probably factored into how successful they were in the run and the pass game. Last week, the offense looked like a team that could score 30 points a game. I don't know if we can really expect that from Carson Wentz. And he did bemoan the fact that he took some sacks. He said when he looked back at the tape, he realized, I need to get rid of the football. I need to throw it away. That's an area of improvement. They should be a little bit better there with Ryan Kelly in, but I also think that at least one of the sacks was purely on Carson Wentz holding the ball too long. Maybe another one was Jordan Mason, not because PFF only gave one of the sacks to an offensive lineman, and he gave the other 2 to somebody else. I think Mason got 1, and then Wentz was probably dinged with the other one. So he does have to improve there, that he can't take bad sacks that put them back. They can't have penalties, which happened to them. And they can't rely on getting 8 yards a carry from Jordan Mason against the next 2 teams, especially Cleveland, who has been extremely good at stopping the run and totally stifled the Green Bay Packers' ability to run the ball. They also shut down, Joe Burrow in week 1. Like that's a really good defense and an amazing defensive line. Even just outside of Myles Garrett, they've got a lot of talent. So I think that, how many points is expected from an offense with a quarterback who just got here a month ago, with a quarterback who's been a backup, but all the weapons, and we know how it all can work together when it's clicking. We talk many times about the Nick Mullins portion of that, of just getting the ball to the right places, and he throws for 400 yards. And some of that was because those were shootouts, but Mullins often threw the ball to the right person in the right place. And in Kevin O'Connell's offense, if you do that, you will have generally a lot of success. But even for the bigger picture for this season, where do we set the bar for this team in order to call them a contender? Because watching the defense, looking at them at full strength, seeing what they really look like with Harrison Smith, which is a different team, I thought, with Harrison Smith out there, getting healthier as they get Blake Cashman back later in the season, though Eric Wilson has been phenomenal in 2 out of the 3 games. The defensive ceiling is the best defense in the league. And even if they don't finish number 1 in points, they could still be the best considering who they're going to play in the future. But they have the ceiling of being a top 5 defense. So how good do you have to be? Their special teams is playing well. They're getting good returning. They're getting good kicking. They're actually getting good punting and good punt coverage. I'm writing about Ty Felton. Maybe some of you who watch the press conferences heard me ask that to Kevin O'Connell. Got a piece coming out on that. So they've been good in a lot of those areas on defense, on special teams, outside of offense. But if you play the way that you played the first couple weeks, that's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to win any games. If you play the way you played last week, well, you're going to win every game, but you're not playing Cincinnati every single week. So where are we setting the bar for this team to truly compete in the NFC North? You've also seen Green Bay. You've seen Detroit. I mean, we can't totally write off Chicago. I think that their last game was Dallas being an absolute joke, but still, they put up a bunch of points. Caleb Williams played better. So you're going to have to win double-digit games in order to make the playoffs, I think, in the NFC this year. I think that's fair to say that 10-7 is the old 9-7, and you have a lot of competition. You have teams like the Rams, Seattle, Washington, Philly. Maybe probably only one team out of the South because it's the South, but there's going to be a lot of competition for those playoff spots this year. So how good does that offense have to be with all these weapons? And my answer would be, I think like 13th. That's the number that popped into my head first. I don't think that you have to be first, but I don't think you could be 20th. And we have kind of seen the extremes of that a little bit, not first under KOC, but last year at times their offense was very exciting and put up huge point totals in a couple of games. And I think finished in the top 10 last year with Sam Darnold. And that was good enough for 14 wins with a relatively easy schedule. With a harder schedule, if you have the same offensive performance, maybe you end up with 12 wins or 13 or something like that. But I think it has to be in that there's going to be tiers of it. There's going to be, it looks like, the Buffalo tier, the Lions tier, probably the Ravens tier if Derrick Henry stops fumbling the football, that are way up there. And then I think you got to be in that maybe second-ish, back end of the second tier offenses in order to still compete when you have a top-notch defense. But how good do you guys think that they have to be? So we'll look at your thoughts on Jordan Addison, the FanDuel question of the day, over under 42.5 yards for his return, and whatever else is on your guys' mind this evening. So Aaron has 4 receptions for 55 yards for Jordan Addison. I mean, it doesn't seem like this is kind of hard to say, because I was just about to say, this doesn't feel like the type of game where we get 600 yards passing between the two teams, because they're overseas, the weird schedules. There's not always offensive explosion games when it comes to playing in London, at least as a sample size, but I would assume that Dublin this applies for as well. We don't know what the playing surface is going to look like. I think that's a legitimate conversation. So is this going to be an explosion of offense game? I would expect it to look more like the Jets game, which was pretty gnarly last year. Or even if we go to 2022 against New Orleans, pretty ugly offensively there. They needed a pass interference that got them like 40 yards to win that game. And we go back to 2017 where, I don't know, did they have 6 points in the first half against Cleveland before running away from a really bad Cleveland team in the second half? So a lot of these games that have been overseas have not exactly been beauty contests. So I'm not setting the bar for Jordan Addison at, hey, 120 yards right out of the gate, because I don't know how much passing yards they're going to end up with. If they end up with 210 passing yards, that might be a pretty good day. At the same time, this is a Steelers team that let the Jets score 30 plus against them and nearly beat them with a bunch of screen passes and stuff. So maybe KOC could get that screen game going against a Pittsburgh team that seems to struggle to tackle. But I think 4 catches for 55 yards. CJ's got 5 for 70. That's, I think, a pretty good number there. Maybe setting the bar a little bit on the high side, depending on how it goes. I mean, how many passes do you end up throwing? If Jordan Mason's playing the way that Jordan Mason played last week against Pittsburgh, you might only need 20 completions in the game to win, or less to win if he's playing like that. You know, maybe you end up 17 for 27 or something, and that can win you a game if Mason is so much in control like he was last week. Though I assume Pittsburgh is going to have it on their big whiteboard, stop Jordan Mason, as a thing that they circle for this week. So 5 for 70 would be a little on the high side for me. Not that we haven't seen that from Addison before, but that would be a really good day. Chicken, I'll just call you that, says, did you notice the joy Carson Wentz approached his press conference today with? It was very telling to me, and it made him so much easier to root for in McCarthy's absence. Yeah, I mean, since Carson Wentz has gotten here, I mean, I think he has really had a lot of enthusiasm for being a Minnesota Viking. That was before he knew he was going to play. You could see that with him when he talked about walking through the halls and looking at all the pictures of guys that he had grown up rooting for, as somebody who came down from I think he's from North Dakota. I don't want to mess that up. I know he went there, college wise, but I think he's from North Dakota. So coming down to the Twin Cities, to the Metrodome, and cheering on the Vikings. And then, someday you're wearing your favorite team's colors. I mean, that's pretty cool. For these folks who play football, they get to play a kid's game for their entire career. So having that kind of memory for him, and loving football, seeing the Vikings coming down, now playing for the team, I think he's been really happy to be a Minnesota Viking. And, but to your point, I didn't know how he was going to approach being the backup. And when we first spoke to him, I mean, I've not been around Carson Wentz before. I've seen a press conference or two, but I've never spoken to him before. So I didn't know what we were expecting. Sometimes you get a guy who's been a veteran before, who's like, I could still play in this league. Like, don't ask me questions about being a backup or helping the starter. And you're like, okay, man. But in this case, he was enthusiastic the entire time about talking with McCarthy about his preparation, helping McCarthy get ready for those first 2 games. I think he was well prepared to do that for the entire season, just like he did for Patrick Mahomes, just like he did for Matthew Stafford. Like, he had done that before, but now it has to feel like a second life for him, because in Washington 2022, that's a bad situation. That's a team that was just falling apart, and it wasn't coached well, and the ownership thing was going on, and it was just a total mess. So the last time he got to play with a halfway decent team, he was 1 game away from making the playoffs. They fall apart in the last game of the season, 2021, with the Colts. They missed the postseason, and then, after that, he only starts a couple of games until now. So for him, this has to feel like, and you walk in too and look around, and there's Jordan Addison back and Jefferson. And I agree with what KOC said, by the way. If I was giving out, maybe we need that to be an award of like who gets the podium for the best camp. It probably would have been Grenard, Jordan Addison. I'd have to think about who else. But I mean, though, like Grenard and Jordan Addison were both dominant players during training camp. Probably Jordan Mason, I think. I think we probably talked about that 50 times during camp. Like, this guy looks pretty legit. So Jordan Addison, he gets him out there and is probably throwing, some balls to him in practice, being like, okay, after having Justin Jefferson catch a ball from him where he throws it 8 yards in the air and he turns it into 36 last week. So, I would be pretty pumped too, because you get to land in the situation where every quarterback has talked about wanting to be, including Aaron Rodgers, who they're going to play this week. Aaron Rodgers wanted to be here. Everybody, I think, wants to play quarterback with this group of weapons and with KOC in their headset after what happened last year with Sam Darnold. So I'd be pretty pumped too. But I agree with you. I think that his overall attitude has been very, very professional since arriving here, and seems like a guy who's just very happy to be in Minnesota and to have this opportunity. So yeah, I agree with you. And that I think is, part of like the bigger discussion about Carson Wentz. And when we were talking about, the disappointment from fans that JJ McCarthy got hurt, and I made the metaphor about going to see a movie with Brad Pitt and then 10 minutes in, I take over for him. And you're like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this guy. So like, I get it. But I think you can separate wanting JJ McCarthy to be the long-term answer and the franchise quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, while also looking at a guy like Carson Wentz. And I know you've seen this many times. You've been forced to root for this type of guy many times, but it's still a good potential story here that Wentz shows up after being such a journeyman and gets his chance to play. And if he guides them through and they win games, like that's really cool for him. So I think you can put those two things in two different buckets of being disappointed that JJ McCarthy's not playing, but also not, turning your TV off on Sunday morning because it's not JJ McCarthy. Like I think Carson Wentz is not only a good story of a guy who is getting his opportunity with the franchise that he grew up rooting for, but also I think he has been a good quarterback before and really wants to prove that he's still is. And last year, I talked with Rich Gannon for a story, and I made that comparison with Sam Darnold, who really became Rich Gannon, truly, like Oakland Raiders, Rich Gannon, but it's the same kind of thing. And we have seen it a number of times through the NFL where a starting quarterback kind of has it fall apart, is a backup for a little while, comes back, wins games. And I know some of you will say, well, often do they win the Super Bowl? Sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes, but at least for now, like, let's not put the, cart before the horse here. They have 2 games to win, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Because if they go 1-1, if they go 0-2, you're kind of going to look at it like, what is this season? If they go 2-0, I think it's a much clearer path that they would likely stay with Carson Wentz going forward out of the bye week, and then you see where it goes. And if he has 2 really good games, you might feel like, look around, guys, this man can seriously compete in the NFC. And even though I think a lot of Jared Goff, and I think a lot of Jordan Love too, I think those are both very good quarterbacks, neither one of them is crazy better than Carson Wentz at his absolute best. And it's not like he's 47. He's like 33. We kind of treat him like he's about 100 years old. So I don't know. Like, I think what you're talking about is put that in just 2 different places in your mind of wanting McCarthy to come back, and Carson Wentz could be very good for your team. Nick has 5 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown for Jordan Addison. That would be a huge day. Nick says KOC joked about the chill caused by him calling 4 runs in a row. Was he staring me down? I'll tell you the truth. I'm not the only one to have taken note that Kevin O'Connell does not always run the football and stick with the run. In fact, Kevin O'Connell himself is well aware of the fact that he has not done that. Like, he knows what the numbers are. He knows what the offense has looked like in the past few years. And I think that what he would say about that is, it's not that he doesn't want to, and that was part of the answer. It's not that he doesn't want to give the ball to Jordan Mason. It's that in years past, he hasn't felt like he could really slam the throttle down. Now, I think there were times where he could have. There was the time against Chicago where he's got Dobbs out there throwing 35 passes when they're averaging 5 yards a carry. Or there's the time, against Green Bay where you're up 17 points, you kick a field goal, you're up 3 scores, and you're running away with the game, and instead you're throwing an interception in the red zone. The last time they were in London, I know that Aaron Jones was hurt, but you're throwing 3rd and 16 passes. Like, yeah, there's been plenty of times where it's been very reasonable to say, okay, man, you can run there. It's okay. Wind some clock or something. But I think what gives him a lot of confidence to do that is when you dial up a play call, outside zone, here you go, 7 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards. And you're like, why don't I just push that button again? That is what gives you a lot of confidence. And I also think with Jordan Mason, one of the things I really like watching him run is that there'll look like there's nothing there. It's collapsed, and he'll just push somebody for 2.5 yards. And while that's not amazing, that's still a good positive run for Jordan Mason, where we had seen in the past, Madison, when it wasn't working for him, or even Aaron Jones last year, I thought at times he had wiggle to him and he would kind of sometimes get a few yards where there was nothing, but he would also get caught at times where he runs into a brick wall and he's just not big enough. Jordan Mason is big enough. So I think KOC has shown us a little bit early on that he's willing to do that. I think the first 2 games needed more of Jordan Mason, and all of us, myself, all of you guys who said, hey man, I want more Jordan Mason, just like I want more cowbell SNL bit. Like, I got a fever and the only thing that can cure it is more Jordan Mason. I think everybody was a little bit justified there by the way that he played against Cincinnati. They need answers if he doesn't. But he looks like someone to me that can be consistent from week to week because of the way that he runs. Zach says, we know for sure no McCarthy week 5. Didn't see that. So we don't know 100% is week 5 the bye week? So yeah, I mean, no one's playing in the bye week, but not to be nitpicky. As far as week 4, I think you mean probably against Cleveland. I don't know that for 100%, but that's been reported that he would not play overseas. He is going to travel with the team, but we'll have to find out. I mean, even Kevin O'Connell today with his update on JJ McCarthy. I don't know, did I play that earlier? His update on JJ McCarthy was very, very vague. If I didn't, here it is.
Kevin, do you anticipate JJ practicing at all this week? McCarthy.
I don't have an answer for that right now. I just know that he's continuing to progress along and is into a kind of a different phase of that rehab from the initial kind of just the reactionary kind of early treatment to that injury and swelling and kind of getting some of the healing started, and then now it becomes the strengthening, the mobility, and kind of building himself back.
So not much of a real specific update about if he would practice this week. Could he be ready to play against the Cleveland Browns? If I had to guess, if Carson Wentz threw 3 interceptions and they lost 28-0, then I think that it would magically heal a little bit faster. And maybe he would be ready to play against Cleveland. And if the same thing goes, if they lost to Cleveland in a blowout and it was really embarrassing and they lose both games and all of a sudden they're looking at a season on the brink, you're probably going to see JJ McCarthy coming out of the break there. I think it makes a lot of sense to play Carson Wentz against 2 very nasty defenses, especially Cleveland, which has an argument for the best defense in the entire NFL. So you'd rather have JJ McCarthy with a bye week to be 100% totally healed to go over and play. Kevin O'Connell has never said specifically that it wasn't going to happen. Tracy Wolfson reported, I thought I saw one other place, maybe it was Schefter, I'd have to check on that, about like him not playing until he comes out of the bye. But they've made it clear that they want him to be 100% if he gets back on the field, when he gets back on the field. It's hard to pick up any hints, though, of them saying, oh, yeah, guys, he's definitely going to be back at this time. So none of us really know when JJ McCarthy is going to get back. But that injury update right there, and you could tell Kevin O'Connell, I think his least favorite part of the job is answering injury questions, because that one was pretty pained as he was trying to get that out. But it was not, this is how it's going to go. This week he's going to be at this point, and then next week he'll be ready to play. And they are truly playing this by ear. And if I had to guess, I would say they're playing this just by how Carson Wentz performs. And if he keeps playing well, then he's going to keep being the quarterback. And if he struggles and they lose and the season feels like it's coming apart at the seams, then you're going to see JJ McCarthy come back. And probably the hardest situation is if it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. That would be the hardest. If you win against Pittsburgh, lose against Cleveland, you come home going, I don't know. And then you're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. That is an incredibly difficult team to play. Nolan Smith went on IR, and that helps. And they've looked a little more human defensively than they did last year without Milton Williams. But still, like, that's not an easy matchup. And then 4 days later, it's the LA Chargers. I was watching Jim Rome earlier, a clip of him talking with Steve Mariucci, who was a former Detroit and San Francisco head coach. And he asked him how he would handle this situation. And Mariucci said, I don't know. I mean, basically it was like, well, if Wentz keeps playing well and then if he doesn't, I don't know. I mean, I think everybody is in wait and see mode about when he's coming back. But no, there hasn't been anything quite official. So, Nick, I'm just joking about the Rich Eisen thing. It was just funny to me that I ended up in a clip asking a question and he made fun of how I asked the question. But then I'm like, that's how KOC talks. I was just using their language, man. And that's all. I wasn't offended. I'm a big fan of Rich Eisen. I just thought it was funny because I said thrower of the football because that's KOC's language, as you heard in that clip about Addison where he said a catcher of the football. And I think they all use that type of terminology. Let's see. Grateful Dad says there weren't any wide receivers running routes in the middle of the field last week. Can't wait for Addison to get back. Yeah, that's I'm trying to think about, there were a few. It was mostly TJ Hawkinson, I think, right? When he caught the ball in the middle of the field, because there was one where Wentz did a little bit of a pump fake and then kind of just flicked it to TJ Hawkinson. I mean, it seemed like he was taking a similar approach to Kirk, where it was, I'm going to look at my first read, and if it's not there, then I'll probably just go to TJ Hawkinson and keep the train on the track, which is a pretty good strategy for an offense. I think we've seen that work pretty well before, but I mean, everything was open for them last week to the outsides. I would have to look at the next gen chart to see how many he completed over the middle of the field. But that's something that they will have to use at some point. I mean, that's where Hawkinson usually tends to live. They run a lot of crossing routes, especially deep type of crossing routes with Jordan Addison. And I guess that's what I wonder when it comes to Addison is what type of route tree are we looking at? Because the guy hasn't played yet this season. I have no doubt he's in good shape, but he hasn't played yet this year. So getting him, how many snaps do you want him to get? Do you want him to go play 50 snaps? That might be a lot for somebody in their first game coming back after being out a few weeks. Not like he was injured, but it's just, from a stamina perspective, are you having him run deep stuff? Are you getting the football into his hands quickly? I think he could do anything. And where he's specifically really good is those downfield routes where it's a double move and he can, snap off a route and you could time it out. That's where he's at his absolute best. So will they be able to execute stuff like that with Carson Wentz? They did some of it last week, and he pointed out that some reads are going to be the same versus some defenses pretty much no matter what and who you're facing. It just comes down to getting it right with the wide receiver for how many steps they're at and their timing and their speed and stuff like that. But no doubt, Addison makes this more dynamic. We just have not seen a lot from Adam Thielen in terms of targets, but we haven't seen a lot from anybody in terms of targets because the first two games, they couldn't sustain drives. And then the third game, they blow out Cincinnati to the point where you're just taking out starters and you're, having Carson Wentz hand off a ton and only throw 20 passes. So everybody needs to get a little more involved. But yeah, I mean, when you have someone like Jordan Addison, you can use the middle of the field a lot better than before. Hunter says last week's Wentz game reminded me of Sam Darnold's game against the Giants. I think it's a great comparison. And I talk about this all the time, that it annoys me when quarterbacks are talked about as game managers because that's the game most of the time. There's a handful of great throws, great plays that have to be made to win. And the guys who are unbelievable aliens like Allen and Mahomes and Lamar, those guys routinely do things that are highlight reel worthy. But you know what? They also keep the train on the tracks and manage the game most of the time. Josh Allen does not throw 50 passes down the field a game. He doesn't throw them off structure 50 times a game. It's 5 times a game. And those 5 times for him are all-time great. They're super special. They're incredible. But a lot of times it's take the snap. Where are you supposed to go with it? Get it out. Josh Allen throws a ton of short passes. I mean, that was what, Carson Wentz did last week was I think he was 7 for 8 on short passes. And I would be curious to look at, since Allen was the MVP last year, how many passes of his were under 10 yards. I'm going to pull this up on PFF just out of curiosity. 40% of Josh Allen's passes last year were between 0 and 9, and 20% were behind the line of scrimmage. So do some math. Yeah, that's 60% of Josh Allen, the MVP of the league. 60% of his passes last year were not over 10 yards. So that tells you just how much game managing is important to succeed in the NFL. And I felt like last year, early on, Sam Darnold did an amazing job of game managing, not making mistakes. Now, Wentz took too many sacks in the game, and he knows that and has to correct it. But, and Darnold took the sacks too, and it was problematic for him at times. I think that's a feature of the KOC offense. I think it's hard not to take sacks when you have downfield routes sometimes. But otherwise, when he was getting rid of the ball in those short areas, he was succeeding. Darnold did that too, and then hit 2 deep shots. For Wentz, he never had to go deep down the field, but he did get a couple of big plays in. One was a deep comeback that I think was maybe 20 yards or something for Justin Jefferson. There's another one, that slant route that went for 36. So he was able to create a couple of explosive plays that way, but he probably will have to push the ball down the field a little bit more, and now it's easier to do that with Jordan Addison. CJ says, how good can the offense be? Health aside, it's going to come down to the quarterback. Can Wentz have a Randall Cunningham run? You're looking at 98 to 2000, or Keenum level 2017, stack team everywhere else. So 98 is an aberration that will never be repeated probably for an all-time great. At the time, if I'm not mistaken, they scored more points in that season than had ever been scored by an offense in NFL history. So I don't think we're looking at that. I don't think that we're looking at quite Sam Darnold because, well, I did say that, Carson Wentz is 32 or 33. He's not 64. He's a little bit long in the tooth and not quite the athlete maybe he was early in his career, where Sam Darnold was in his physical prime. And you still see it. Sam Darnold's playing great football for the Seattle Seahawks. Like he is actually at an age. The funny thing, historically, and you guys know how much I like this stuff, looking back at history and quarterbacks, historically, there's a ton of quarterbacks, and I mean a ton, who did not hit their peak until 27, 28, 29, 30. I mean, Warren Moon, former Viking, I think his career didn't even start because he was in the CFL until he was 28, 29, 30. Jim Kelly was that way. Steve Young was 30 years old by the time he got to play. I've mentioned Alex Smith, I think was 27 or 28. I don't believe Eli Manning went to his first Pro Bowl until he was 28. This is also a J.J. McCarthy point on patience with quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield is now looking like a great quarterback. He's reaching his peak in his late 20s. So, with Sam Darnold, it was a little bit different for me because that was a former top draft pick who looked like he was coming into his prime. I don't think that about Carson Wentz. I think that his prime is past, but he certainly has a live enough arm and a quick enough mind to stand in there and make all the throws that Kevin O'Connell needs him to make. And that's where you can have a good offense, and tying it back into what's the ceiling. Well, the ceiling on someone who's been around the block, maybe isn't at their peak at this point, and has a strong arm and it lacks in mobility, etc., is not first in the league. It's just not. They probably won't have the best offense. But if they can have a good offense and do the other things well, you can win a lot of games. That to me is a Case Keenum conversation. Where were the Vikings in scoring in 2017? They were probably, and that was a number 1 defense, but still, like they were probably something in the range of 7 to 10 at that year, and the same with last year. And they finish up, I think, 9th or 10th in offense. If you can do that, then it's going to make a big difference. And Joe, I agree that the turnovers help the offense score a lot of points. That's true. But also, like, look at the efficiency. I mean, what was it? 8.7 yards per attempt, 7.3 yards per run. There's no denying it. I don't think, and this is what I just really didn't understand about some of the reaction to Wentz's game. Like, he played well. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's really no debating it. When you can complete 70% of your passes at nearly 9 yards a pass, you played great football. Period. Like, there's really no debate about it. We don't have to downplay the way Carson Wentz played and how good that was just because you want to see JJ McCarthy. I think, again, we can separate those things to this guy played really well. Can you play that well week in and week out? Can you get away with, as you're saying, you got 5 turnovers. Can you get away with something like, the penalties, the sacks that they got away with? Are you going to get 5 turnovers? No, they need to be sharper than that. But from an efficiency, a play-to-play execution, it was good. It was very good. And Pittsburgh's going to bring a better defense, and Cleveland's going to bring a great defense, and those will be better tests for how good Carson Wentz can be, and he's going to have almost a full offense around him, which will be, it's almost there without Donovan Jackson, but Randall's a starter, so we could say he's really going to have the full amount other than Aaron Jones of starters on offense. Rob is expecting a 45-17 type win. The Steelers looked very average. Rodgers looks slow. I think the D-line will have more success against the Steelers this week than they had last week. Well, the D-line was phenomenal last week. They were all over. They were all over Jake Browning. And yes, Aaron Rodgers does look very slow. And I know in Pittsburgh they're having these debates about his PFF grade, which I always try to warn a little bit against single game or 2 games, 3 games. Hey, in the last 3 games, this is a guy's PFF grade, because football is such small sample sizes. Just for example, you have a couple bad plays, or how about this, for example, you have a couple great plays for Isaiah Rodgers, and he's like the highest graded corner in the league after this last game. Well, I think a lot of Isaiah Rodgers, I don't think he's the best corner in the whole league, but right now his PFF grade. So I don't think that Rodgers is the worst quarterback, but he's had a lot of turnover-worthy plays, and that's where I think the Vikings could benefit. And, we're just saying, hey, they're not going to have 5 turnovers. Like, if he plays the way he has he's got 7. And so if he plays the way that he has the last couple weeks, he's got 7 turnover-worthy plays, and the Vikings take advantage. They can get the ball a lot. Daniel says Dallas Turner will get 2 sacks. Mark it down. I could see that. Dallas is playing well. He's playing well. He has been not Lawrence Taylor, not quite Chris Dolman yet, not quite Jared Allen yet, but he's playing well. And he is making progress in the way that I thought he would make progress, which was kind of not, I don't want to say super slowly, but just one sort of step at a time. Where last year he starts very slowly. He's not getting on the field. And then he proves to them behind the scenes that he deserves to be on the field. He gets in that Indianapolis game. He plays well. Then he's playing 30 snaps a game. He gets a couple sacks. He gets an interception. And you see some progress, and he's starting to get it. And then this year, he comes in. In the first game, he's excellent against the run. In the second game, he struggled. And then especially when it came to setting edges, I don't think he's ever going to be that player with his size that's just this amazing edge setter that you can rely on. Certainly wasn't the only one that struggled against the run in that game. And then against Cincinnati, I thought he was terrific, kind of all over the field. He's probably going to miss tackles because he's not the biggest guy. He's probably going to try to punch the ball out at times, and you're going to see that. But that quickness that he has, and I think pairing that with understanding how the defense is supposed to work is resulting in some good things for him. And I did not mention that there was some bad news on the injury report, but that's Van Ginkel. And you got to wonder a little bit about where Andrew Van Ginkel is right now, because when Kevin O'Connell was asked about it, he said, well, it's kind of pertaining to the neck injury that he had, and that's why the snaps were limited, and that's why the practice is limited, and it's not really what you want to hear about where Van Ginkel is at right now health-wise. So it's going to be a trial by fire for Dallas Turner. It's a heck of a backup to have, a guy that, is a first-round draft pick, but we might not see as much of Andrew Van Ginkel this year for his snap count as we saw last year, probably nowhere close if he's dealing with a neck injury throughout the season. So they're going to need Dallas Turner. Let me get in, and I know I've fallen behind with questions, but quick pause for an ad read here and a reminder about that FanDuel question of the day. Jordan Addison over under 42.5 yards. How many catches and yards are you expecting for Addison's debut? Also want to remind you, I know a lot of you are in hiring positions in your jobs, and it's just not a lot of fun because you look for great candidates, but you get flooded with resumes, people who aren't qualified, and then good candidates get buried. And again, that's not always the easiest thing. That's why you want to try ZipRecruiter. It is very easy, and you could try it for free right now. ZipRecruiter.com/audio. You can send. If you want a candidate to apply, you can send them an invite to apply. Also, their smart technology will identify people that would be good candidates for your job. That makes it a lot easier where you don't have to go sifting through thousands and thousands of resumes. It will just help you identify somebody that might work for you. So ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter help you find what you're looking for. That needle in a haystack, great candidate for your job. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day, and you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. That is ZipRecruiter.com/audio, the smartest way to hire. Got Ahmad Hicks coming up in just a little bit, but let me continue with your comments. Marauder says the offense had more chances in short fields, not overpowering offensively. 14 points caused by the quarterback. No, I mean, look, the efficiency of that game was good. I don't think there's any doubting that. On a play-to-play basis, they moved the ball. Was it the greatest? I could pull up the box score to see, let's see. Let me pull up the box score to see exactly how many yards per play they had last week. But that's, although, Max Brosmer was in at the end and they were just handing off. So but we'll look at it anyway, just as an overall. Let's see. For team stats, they were at 352 yards on 58 plays, which is 6.1 yards per play. 6.1 yards per play is elite. That's at the top of the league every year. Is the top teams are somewhere in that ballpark. The yards per attempt, he did lose some yardage on sacks, but yards per rush, it was a really, really good offensive performance. It helped that they had short fields, but one of their best drives, and it helped that they had Christian Darrisaw, but one of their best touchdown drives was with Brandel in there, and it was a longer field, and they were just able to move the football. So if they play like that, that's what I'm saying about, we don't need to downplay that. I think that it was very good. You can try to put it in better context, though. Yeah, that it was a team that got down in the game. They were probably distraught after a couple of the things that happened from Isaiah Rodgers bringing back touchdowns and how poorly the offense was playing, and it got away from them. So that made things easier. When you come out in the second half and it's 38 or 38-3, 34-3, whatever it was at halftime, and then, are you super pumped to stop Jordan Mason running at you? Probably not. That helped. And last year, Sam Darnold's stats were helped by having a great defense. So you're allowed to do that, though. You're allowed to take advantage of the things that are there in front of you. It's just that I think we all know this. What is Carson Wentz going to need in order to have 2 wins here, in order to make his case to be the quarterback going forward, in order to have a good enough offense for this team to argue that they can run with anybody in the NFL? I think he clearly needs all of his receivers healthy, his offensive line healthy, and he's going to need help. He is going to need short fields. He is going to need good special teams returning and punt coverage and all this. We know this. If you're going to do this, you're going to have a great season with a backup caliber quarterback in there, as we saw them do last year or in 2017 and et cetera. You need to have a lot of other parts of the team cooking. At the moment, this team is. And then the McCarthy decision comes somewhere down the road. But I don't think you have to downplay what Wentz did because, you're hoping that McCarthy ends up coming back. That's the I got a bunch of emails on this because I said the other day, I think that 90% of the fan base would rather them not win with Carson Wentz so they could get back to McCarthy as soon as possible. And I got a bunch of emails that said, hey, now, like, I want to see them win every single game. And, that, okay, like, I get that. But I think there's some truth to that. And I don't think that that's the right approach. I think that Carson Wentz, if he struggles and he loses these 2 games, you're talking about potentially seeing a season that had so much hope and so much investment and so much work go into it with this roster swirling down the drain if Carson Wentz doesn't play well. I don't think you want that because that is miserable. JJ McCarthy is 22 years old. He can develop over years, whether it's this year, getting into games later this year, however it might be. He can eventually still be a very good quarterback in the NFL. He is extremely, ridiculously young right now. But that's not the case for everybody on this team. I don't think you want to waste what could potentially be Harrison Smith's last year. I don't think you want to waste how many millions between Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. I don't think you want to waste a year of Jordan Mason where he's crushing it, or a year of Christian Darrisaw, or a year of Justin Jefferson. It just seems like it's a little bit too narrowly focused to only be thinking about JJ McCarthy, when I think that all of you, when you put your flag outside your house or you wear your jacket to work or whatever, I think it says a franchise name rather than just JJ McCarthy, right? So I don't think you should be down on, Carson Wentz's possibilities here because of that. Now, if you're skeptical on it because he's been a backup quarterback and you just don't think he's going to be that great, now that's fair. That's a fair take, because he hasn't been a great quarterback in the NFL for a while. And I know that part of what I do, because I talk to you guys so much, is I have become, I think, more interested in how the fans are thinking about certain things and talking about that, because I hear from you guys constantly, and it was really striking the other day. But I think you want your team to win here. This is not tank time. If they were ever going to tank, it was coming out of that 2019 season into 2020. They didn't do it. It was 2023 when they get to 0-3. They, maybe you trade away Kirk there or something or whatever. That would have been the time. But those times are gone. I think every Sunday, no matter who is your quarterback with this group, you are talking about trying to win. Grateful Dead, how about signing CJ Gardner-Johnson? I don't know, man. He just seems to be having problems everywhere he goes. I think might be a bit of a personality issue. Plus, they're really good at safety. Don't think that you really want to do that. William says, well, Rodgers isn't as quick as he used to be. Bit worried about his past experience with B-Flow's defense will make him look better than he still is. I think if there's one guy who can be problematic, it's DK Metcalf. He is huge, and he is not easy to tackle, and he gave them problems last year against the Seattle Seahawks. He is a handful. So I think that tackling him is a big deal. This team has not blown me away. Now, they've blown me away with their ability to peanut punch and to take the ball away, but they have not blown me away with their ability to tackle so far this year. And what I notice is they throw a lot of short passes to DK Metcalf, which is probably a smart strategy, by the way, that I think Seattle was probably missing, or maybe just Geno Smith, because he's not great. And when I see people say he's great, I'm baffled. I never really understand that, but I mean, he's okay. He's sort of just a guy. But I'm curious, receiving depth. Yeah, so out of all of his targets this year for DK Metcalf, only 6 of his targets out of 12, 18. So only 6 of his 18 targets have gone downfield, and only 2 of them have gone beyond 20 yards. So they're going to throw short to DK Metcalf, and they are going to make the other team the tackle. And he's got some missed tackles. He's got first downs. Like, he's done a good job with their short passing game. And I think you're going to see a lot of DK Metcalf in the quick passing game. That would be the guy I would be concerned about. Rodgers could still throw the ball. That's what I've seen from him playing with Pittsburgh. But I don't think he can move. And his quarterback rating when pressured, or I'm sorry, PFF grade when pressured is 27. He's as bad as it gets when pressured. That's the key here. Can you make him uncomfortable? Because that is going to be a problem for him. That is not for the Vikings. And Bobby points that out. Rodgers' numbers this season in the plus are all from clean. Yep. Yeah. You're right. Yep. That's exactly what I was looking at too, Bobby, is that it drops tremendously when there's any sort of pressure involved with Aaron Rodgers. But, he's seen a lot. Last year, though, he got fooled. Remember, Van Ginkel picking him off. He got fooled a bunch of times. So I've never thought that Aaron Rodgers was the GOAT when it came to picking apart defenses mentally. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. I always thought with Rodgers that his physical ability made up for times, because I would watch Harrison Smith play games with him, and Harrison would win a lot. And I think what would happen oftentimes was Rodgers would scramble around and he would be able to make plays off of structure that were breathtaking, but he wouldn't read the defense necessarily right, and he would just have to make something up. Well, now he's got to read the defense right every single time from the pocket. That's hard. I think that's hard for him to do. I mean, he's all-time great, but I don't think that was his best asset. I think it was tight window throws, rockets into windows that you'd never expect, crazy athleticism of being able to throw from any platform, absurd all-time great arm strength. But I don't think it was just standing there and reading a defense. That was more of a Peyton Manning type of thing. And actually, that's really hard to do just in general these days with how much deception there is. Marauder says Caleb was successful because he could read Eberflus's defense. I mean, that Dallas defense is atrocious. Yeah, there were throws on Sunday from Caleb Williams that were on time to the right guys. He's got great receivers. I don't know what that offense is going to be. I don't think Chicago has a very good defense. And you're right. They were playing probably the worst defense in the NFL. It's just, we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Deplorable Neanderthal says Addison had major chemistry with JJ, but does that mean he'll do stellar work with Wentz? I know he's a really good receiver overall. I think that last part is right. Addison had good chemistry with Dobbs, right? Did he play with Dobbs? I assume he played with Dobbs. I mean, he's just really good. I think what Wentz showed us a little bit is that chemistry can be overrated if you run the plays correctly and you have the receivers to make the plays. Because Addison, look, when Addison played with Kenny Pickett, he made the guy a first-round pick. When he played with Caleb Williams, he put him on the map for him to be the first overall draft pick. When he played with Kirk Cousins, Kirk said, man, they crushed that draft pick about 2 games into Addison's career. And then, we saw it with Sam Darnold last year, how effective Addison was. So I don't really have much doubt that the guy's just really dang good at football. I think that that's probably what it is. But it does factor in to JJ McCarthy in the start of his season, the fact that he didn't have Jordan Addison, that he got along really, really well with Addison during camp, and then, had to come out and didn't have the guy who was his go-to guy during training camp. I think that did cause some challenges. Let's see. Margaret says JJ sure has a rough introduction to the NFL. Torn meniscus out for the year. 2 starts in with a weak O-line. Had poor protection, not a complete defense. That's tough. It is, no doubt about it, and there's a lot of reasons for what happened against Atlanta. I would also say that is kind of the NFL. There's not too many teams throughout a season that play 17 games with every player in the lineup. Now, that context should be brought up, that he didn't have Addison, that he didn't have Darisaw. Those are all-world players. That's important for sure. And then loses Ryan Kelly and Aaron Jones. All that matters big time to the discussion about JJ McCarthy. It's also something that happens in the NFL, and you have to fight your way through it. Now, what usually happens, though, is that guys learn to fight their way through it as they play, as they grow, as they develop. So the challenge for Kevin O'Connell is, how do you develop JJ McCarthy with also a mind on winning games? Because look, this week you're like, hey, great, this guy's back. Well, Donovan Jackson's out and Aaron Jones is out. And there might be other guys banged up. Like there's very rarely 22 healthy players on offense and defense. The Vikings mostly had it last year with Sam Darnold. They won 14 games. It just tells you like how much that matters, but it usually doesn't happen. So you're right, though. It has been a rough introduction for him. And I think that one of the reasons that you pick JJ McCarthy is that the mental toughness for him is very important. The attitude is very important to drafting him, is that you're expecting him to be able to work his way through adversity. And he's had a lot of it. But again, that's the league. And like, this was my biggest concern about someone like Caleb Williams when he came out in the draft was if you draft Caleb Williams, you got to be concerned about the way he handled adversity at USC. It was not very good. And it hasn't been very good so far in the NFL for Caleb Williams when things have gone wrong for him. You draft JJ McCarthy because you think that he can fight through stuff like that. Because if you go through the entire NFL on a week-to-week basis, I mean, you're going to see all the time crazy stuff, injuries, results where guys totally no-show, shocking stuff that happens, horrible losses, sections of season. I mean, think about all the stuff that Kirk went through. Kirk was as veteran of a veteran quarterback, but every year was a roller coaster. It was an offensive coordinator gets fired one year, and then the next year his wide receiver wants to get traded and sits out of practice. Then the next year COVID hits and half your defense leaves. And then the next year after that, your coach hates you and he's calling you out in press conferences. And then like, think of all the stuff that happened. And then you finally get a 13-win season, but you don't have any defense. And it falls apart in the playoffs. And well, I do think Kirk should have not checked it down. I think we all agree that that was the Ed Donatel loss in the playoffs. And then, of course, it's Kirk can't win in the playoffs. He was also playing that year with broken ribs. It's hard. It's hard. It would, why do we love it? Why do we love it? Why do we all feel what we feel when somebody raises the Lombardi trophy? Is because it's really hard. It's really hard. So McCarthy, you're right, has gotten an introduction to this. And in the best case scenario, all this stuff that he's gone through early, that kind of builds the scar tissue up for what you have to face for an entire career. I mean, think about even like a Justin Herbert. Guys had injuries, the criticism. He has a great year last year, and then the minute they lose in the playoffs, he has a bad game. Then everyone calls him a schmuck, says he's horrible, says he can't play. He's not a top quarterback. They shouldn't have paid him. He stinks. And then he comes out this year and he's great. Every one of these guys has to go through stuff like this in order to get there. Monty says 6 for 65 with a touchdown for Addison. I could see it. 65 seems fair to me. I think 65 is a good number. Yep, that's definitely that's where I would put it, is somewhere between 45 and 65 is reasonable for Addison, because I just don't think that you're throwing like a million passes. KFT says KOC completely changed his game plan for Wentz, calling quick pass plays. Did he make the same accommodations for JJ when he was getting pressured 59% of the plays? So, it's crazy the data we have these days. It's crazy, because I was able to look up using True Media every route that the Vikings ran in the first two games. What a world, right? I mean, you imagine me, right? The person who wrote the book on PFF, I'm like, those Burger Kings that have the place. That's me with all the data. I'm just like jumping in the balls of data and throwing them up in the air. It's really fun. And the thing that stood out to me was that the routes on a lot of the sacks. So I looked up the routes on every sack. I didn't see too many of them going 50 yards down the field. I think with JJ McCarthy, the main issue was, and this is from watching the tape, it's looking at the routes, looking at the data. The main issue was not seeing it and not having the timing right. That to me was the main issue. And here's how I check myself, is not only the data, not only the film, but also when you listen to Kevin O'Connell talk about Carson Wentz. He's talking about Carson Wentz as, well, the footwork is right, the timing is right, and that's why it worked. And it's like, we don't have to read between the lines magically here to understand what he's saying. When it's rhythm and timing, well, it's all supposed to be synced up to 2.5 seconds. And when it's not, then something is off. So I think we can admit that if we're doing like a pie chart of stuff, of all the factors that caused McCarthy to struggle in his first 2 games, Darisaw being out is in the pie chart, and it's got a slot there. And probably some of the play calling has a slot there as well. But J.J. McCarthy's got the biggest piece of the pie because the ball wasn't coming out of his hands, and he's ultimately responsible. This is something that's been studied over years of who's responsible for sacks and pressures, and it's the quarterback is the most responsible. Not 100%, but they're the most responsible, and I felt like he was the most responsible because the ball wasn't coming out on time. You have to throw people open in the NFL, which is a hard thing to learn. It just takes time. So by saying that the pressure rate and the sacks were on the quarterback, which goes into a lot of data that we have, including how long it took him to throw, plus the routes. We can literally look at the plays that were called and where they ran. I think that's a pretty fair conclusion. It's also something that happens when you haven't played a lot of football. I, throughout training camp, thought that McCarthy did a pretty good job of getting his mind in the right place with throwing with anticipation and with getting the football out. I was impressed with him during camp, but they hit you in the NFL. And I think that caused, some of the issues with holding on to it longer, because what happens is guys get hit and then they start speeding up, which forces them to go to their reads too fast. 1, okay, it's not open. 2, okay, it's not open. 3, oh no, now I'm panicking, now I'm hit. And that happened on a number of occasions with McCarthy in there. Again, that doesn't mean that he'll never be good, or it doesn't mean that he couldn't come back soon and be good. It means the analysis of the first 2 games. I don't think that Kevin O'Connell went into this game with Carson Wentz and said, I'm giving him the good plays. I don't think that happened. I don't think he went into the game and said, you know what, I really want to look good now. I really wanted Wentz, so I only called up downfield plays with McCarthy. I don't think that's what happened. Not from looking at a lot of different sources. So whether it was numbers or tape or whatever else, do I think that he had a great game as a play caller that night? Absolutely not. I think that they got schemed up. Their offensive line got beat, and he struggled. But it's sort of a different conversation because he got hurt. Now, if he had gotten benched, straight up benched, no injury, and it was just, hey, you're out, kid, sorry, this would be a bit of a different conversation, because I would have been saying, hey, you got to play him against Cincinnati. It's not as good of a defense. I would not have been for benching him. Just make that clear. I would not have been for benching him at all after the Atlanta game. And I said that in the post game after the Atlanta game. Keep going with this, and it's going to have to work itself out. He's going to have to fight through these tough moments. We've seen them with many other young quarterbacks. Penix just had this happen. Daniels 2 weeks ago. We've seen it a lot. You got to work through it. But he gets hurt, and Wentz comes in and plays like that. What are you supposed to do as the head coach other than look at this and say, well, we got to go with the guy who gives us the best chance to win? That's the way that you often have to go with you're a head coach of a team that's supposed to win and has expectations. Carl says, confused as to when PFF grades matter. Everyone is hammering JJ about how poorly he played, and there's all this Wentz praise. JJ got a 55 grade and Wentz has a 61, not being snarky. No, I understand you're not being snarky. Right. So I think that this is why I kind of talk about single game grades a lot are pretty difficult to pick apart. In part because, and we love them because we like to look at, well, how did they grade everybody after a game? But for a quarterback, I think it's really hard. A 61 for Carson Wentz. Well, there's a few things. Number one, they weigh in when a guy is responsible for a sack. So Wentz, I think, was either 1 or 2 pretty bad sacks. Penalties also weigh into that, into the quarterback. So if you have pre-snap penalties, I think that they weigh those into the quarterback, but definitely sacks would go into it. And running, if he attempted to run it all, would play in. But also the way that the scale works, I don't know that Carson Wentz made any throws in that game that would have been major pluses. So the one issue with the system is it doesn't give enough credit to what they would call zero throws, which are just routine. So you drop back, TJ Hockenson is wide open over the middle, and you just go, dink, there's the football. That's a zero play. That's not a major plus or a major minus, but it moves the sticks. This is why Jared Goff is perpetually underrated by PFF, where he's often graded as a mid quarterback and his offense is number one and his passing game is elite, because Jared Goff makes easy throws. He makes a lot of zero throws because he reads it really well. He knows where to go with the football. His timing is good. Well, that guy was wide open, so it's an easy throw. So it's not a +1 or a +2, it's a 0. Where I think JJ McCarthy ran really well in that game and probably got, I can look at his score right now. I'm guessing that he got a lot of credit for his running in that game. Let me take a look at it. It's a great question. I love the question. I'm not offended at all. No, actually, he did not get very good. Maybe because of the fumbles. Yeah, the fumbles would have brought it down. His grade for that game was a 49, by the way. So that's a pretty big gap. That's a pretty big gap, a 49 and a 61. A 61 is sort of like anyone could have done that, like a routine, replacement level quarterback could have played the same way. I would mostly agree with that. With Wentz, a 49 is like catastrophic. Passing grade 51, rushing, I assume the fumbles are mixed in. Yeah, right. So, but he did. Now, here's the other thing, though. He did have a big time throw in the game, so that would give him some credit. And he did have a 50-yard completion, so that would give him some credit. He did have a couple of good runs. I think that's why. But he had 3 turnover-worthy plays and 6 sacks. I mean, if you're that's the thing. When we go back to that game, as bad as it was, there's not a lot you could do to justify 3 turnover-worthy plays, 6 sacks, fumbling snaps. I mean, it was all pretty tough. It was all pretty tough. So, and that's Marauder. See, this is where I think you're just doing it wrong. If you're saying, well, Wentz had this PFF grade with a lot to work with, but McCarthy had it. Look, a single game grade is one tiny data point out of 50 that we should use to evaluate the game. The most important is the production is going to tell us the best story. The production was they moved the ball great, got the ball into receivers' hands, completed a ton of passes, did so at almost 9 yards a pass. Like, that's going to tell us the most information. And then what I think the PFF grade will tell you is how responsible the quarterback was for the result. So if you get 300 yards passing and the guy gets a 65 grade, probably means he was thrown to a lot of wide open people and didn't get a lot of big pluses from them. Or he got lucky and there were dropped interceptions, which I think there was one turnover-worthy play for Wentz. And it was a throw that was maybe behind a receiver. You can't have that happen. But it's more of a comparison. If a guy throws for 195 yards, but he has to go through hell to do it and he's amazing and all that sort of stuff, well, then he's going to get a high PFF. This happened with Stafford week 1. He got an amazing PFF grade, but you looked at, they scored like 14 points. You're like, what the heck happened? Well, he did a lot to get them to where they were in that game. That's what it's supposed to tell us. So the clear takeaway is from the grade in the game against Atlanta, McCarthy graded about as poor as you could grade, which makes a lot of sense. And Carson Wentz didn't grade all that great because he didn't have to do a whole lot, which O'Connell doesn't want him to. He doesn't. That's the whole idea of the offense. So, hopefully that kind of explains it, of how we can use stuff like that to as an evaluating tool. It's not just they don't just sort of watch the game and go 60. Like there's a grading scale that tells you something, but it does not tell you everything. It tells you just one part of it. So, let's see. Apparently, remember last week, this actually tells you a lot. Like, you guys were talking about this. It tells you a lot. Last week, I was asked about, hey, Bradbury and Ingram had good PFF grades for their first 2 weeks. Like, did the Vikings screw up? And then this week they didn't, because that's who they are. Like, they're inconsistent, right? They're matchup based, especially Bradbury, who could be very good against a very bad defensive tackle, but if he has a good defensive tackle, he's getting steamrolled. And they played Pittsburgh, right? And he got steamrolled, which is kind of to be expected. That's what I mean about the small samples and PFF grades, where we love to look at them for a game and analyze them, but they need a ton of work to really get the true conclusion out of what they're trying to say. And they're just a piece of a huge analysis of how someone played and why, who was on the field, who was the opponent, what were the different reasons, like all that stuff's really important. Let's see. Not completely insane says the irony of this great victory over the Bengals is we finally get back Darisaw. Our run game is humming, and what happens? Jackson has a wrist surgery and is out. Yeah, I mean, that's how it goes sometimes. The thing about Donovan Jackson, though, and I know from my friend Jeremiah Searles, you don't want to call it too early with any young player because things happen. Injuries happen, inconsistency happens, etc. That's how it goes. But boy, he's looked good in 2 out of the 3 games. And the skill set and the attitude, I mean, the intelligence of this guy, like that looks like a really good draft pick. And I think he's just going to get better and better. It looks like a really, really good pick. Sorry, I got way behind on the chat again. Sorry about that. That happens. Let's see. Joe says KOC said something like, if you can't be a game manager, you can't play in the NFL. 100%. That's how I feel. 100%. I mean, most quarterbacks who are special are playing game managing football. I think Drew Brees is like an all-time game manager. Yeah, he's unbelievably accurate, but what that means is you play to the situation. So this is what I thought Carson Wentz did well. I actually thought, like, okay, some of his sacks were bad. Like one of them, he should have definitely got rid of the football. But versus taking, like knowing that you're up versus taking a risk, doing something with the ball, like that's kind of good game management. Or, all right, this is the right time to take a shot play, or this is the wrong time to take a shot play. This is the right time to push it into this window. This is not the right time. This is the right read on this play. If you get that right, I heard somebody say this one time about great quarterbacks is when you're talking about toughness, it's not necessarily get hit and get back up sort of toughness as it is running, like the concentration and the focus to every single play. Get in the huddle, get the call in, get to the line of scrimmage, read the right reads, throw to the right place, no matter what's happening. No matter how loud the Gallahorn is, or who has hit you in the face, or what the cheerleaders are doing, or what the score is, or if you can do that, that's true toughness at the quarterback position. That's game managing, and it should be celebrated because all the best have done it at the absolute most amazing level, including Patrick Mahomes. Even though there's wow moments, there's a lot of game managing. There's a lot of, like, you look at how he won the Super Bowl. It's like, this is the right time to take a risk down the field to Tyreek Hill, or this is not the right time. And last year they won a lot of games because he just didn't turn the ball over. This was something that Teddy was good at. It's just not turning the ball over, ending drives with field goals sometimes. And then, we never got to find out the next step of that, but there was a lot of quarterbacks who were really great at that. We love the highlights, but 70 or 80% of their plays are not the highlights. So that's what KOC is looking for, is he's looking for that game management. And when you get sacked 6 times, when you fumble, when you throw 2 interceptions, you're not managing the game. I don't care who's playing. I don't care if it's TJ Clemmings and Dakota Dozier and whatever other Mike Remmers. I don't care if it's the worst offensive line that's ever played. If you're turning it over and getting sacked, it's not game managing. It's not giving your team a chance to win. So no matter how much stuff went the wrong way, how many play calls were wrong, whatever, that's not playing the game the way that the head coach needs to be played to win. Now, I think he would have done much better against Cincinnati. I guarantee it if he hadn't gotten hurt. And that's the unfortunate part of it, because I agree with anybody who says, he would have probably come back with Darisaw and he would have done better. And it wasn't a great defense and they would have been in favorable situations. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And that's why I will say time and time again that you need to see McCarthy get back out there. He needs to continue to develop. He needs to continue to play, but they're in a conundrum of how you figure out how to do that while also having Carson Wentz doing the thing that KOC wants the most, which is managing the game. And if the wheels come off, then we'll see Just, maybe that changes or something. But they need to be sure that he can do that. And they also need to be sure that he can protect himself and not get hurt again. Because when you play a grand total of 4 times and you have 2 injuries, that's worrisome. I don't like to ever say the whole injury prone thing. I think that labels players the wrong way. But if you are getting sacked and holding onto the ball longer than anybody else, you're going to get injured like that. Or you're having to scramble all the time. That is how you could get hurt. So, they've got to be sure when they put him back in that he's good to go and that he can play on time and he can game manage. And it's not just looking lost and then hoping to make a great play, hoping to make an awesome throw to Jefferson in the end zone, hoping to scramble for 20 yards. I mean, it's got to be a down-to-down type of thing that he's able to do, or it's just not going to work. So, let's see. I don't know. Sometimes I get confused at what you guys are talking about. Like, I don't know when, I don't know how Kirk ended up in the conversation here. KFT, Wentz was good, not great. Is Coller, that's not my name, aiming to be Wentz's agent? Look, Kevin O'Connell said it all. Just go watch the press conferences. He said it all. I'm just saying the things the head coach said about Carson Wentz and how he played. I don't know. I mean, you could believe Kevin O'Connell if you want or not, but I mean, I think it was pretty clear from the way he talked about Carson Wentz. He raved about how he played on time, played point guard. That's the compliment that I think O'Connell likes the most. These are things the head coach said. I'm not making these up. And I don't think O'Connell has led us the wrong way on quarterbacks when he's talked about the strengths of Kirk Cousins, I mean, I've listened to a lot of O'Connell. I think I know how to interpret it. I've looked at a lot of data. I think I know how to interpret it. I've covered a lot of football games. I think I know how to interpret it. It's not the game of the century. I don't think I said that. I think you're sensitive because you want JJ McCarthy. I think that's what it comes down to. The Kurt Russell says Hargrave injury update. Seems like he's going to be okay. It sounded like he was going to travel, but he was out today because he's dealing with something. So might have to work through that. He did come out of the last game, and we're going to have to watch the injury reports for the next couple games because of that. Not completely insane says, I agree with what you said. Pittsburgh and especially Cleveland will be much more difficult to score on. Well, yeah, and look, they're not going to play the whole game up by 30 points. It will be very telling. It will be very telling where they're at. That is for sure. That Pittsburgh and Cleveland are going to tell us how good this offense could be with Carson Wentz. But if they come out of it 2-0 and they've scored 48 points in the 2 games or something, whatever, just pull out a number, 50 points in the 2 games, it's going to be hard for anybody to say, you know what, I think I want to go back to JJ McCarthy. If they're 2-0 and they've won 24-17 in both games or 24-3 or whatever, if it's Cleveland's offense, it's going to be pretty hard to say, hey, you got to go back to JJ McCarthy if you're winning like that. Williams says Eric Wilson has been exceptional. Really good football player. Yep. Really, really good football player. He's been great. It's one of the best signings of the offseason. And that's the thing. You look around, and this is a thing about Wentz and the whole situation. You look around and you go, all right, well, through 3 games, 2-1. It's kind of where we thought they would be, maybe 3-0, but 2-1 it's about right. I would have maybe guessed Joe Burrow would have beat them, but he didn't play. I would not have guessed that Atlanta would have beat them, but they did. 2-1 nonetheless. And you start to look at the individual performances and you go, all right, are the signings working? Jordan Mason, Isaiah Rodgers, yeah. Hargrave and Allen were great in the first game. Didn't have to do a lot in this last one. Hargrave got banged up, but still, okay, those guys are looking like they're doing what they do. The interior offensive line, Kelly, when he's been in, has been great. Fries was great in the last game. Not as great in the first 2, but I think, he's looking like he's turning that corner. He's coming off that injury. Last week, he was really good. Jackson has looked really good as a draft pick. And then we go, to some of the development guys that you get Levi Drake and Jalen Redmond. Like, they're coming along. The depth where you see Eric Wilson step into a role and play extremely well. A lot of things are going right. They're getting healthier. A lot of things are going right. And this is why you have to focus on who gives you the best chance to win each week and not just the development. So DR says, imagine wanting Carson Wentz to play for your team instead of a young top 10 pick. Well, here's why. You're trying to win games. What I just said. You're trying to win games. The franchise is trying to win games. Kevin O'Connell, this is not, I think Brian Murphy said this the other day, it's not a nursery. This is not the cutesy development project for a really bad team. It's not Tennessee, guys. If this is Tennessee, I'd be like, oh my gosh, don't play Carson Wentz 1 second. Are you serious? This is not Tennessee. This is a team that expects to win and has all the goods to win. It's got the defensive coordinator. It's got the head coach of the year. It's got the kicker. It's got the returner. It's got everything on this team. Who gives you the best chance to win? Everyone wants the top 10 draft pick to be the guy who plays, but he's got to give him the best chance. And if he doesn't, then he's got to develop. Also, I would say, imagine thinking that you have to play someone who's 22, that's always the best idea. Is it? Is it always the best idea when I've run through 100 examples of guys who needed more time, and imagine preferring to lose with a quarterback who isn't ready and setting their development back and possibly getting them hurt more. Imagine wanting that instead. I mean, it seems like a lot of just sort of wanting to just flip a table here. That's what it sounds like. I'm just mad. I don't have any good arguments. I'm just angry. Flip the table. That's kind of what it sounds like. But we don't even know where this is going. I'm just saying if they continue to play Carson Wentz and he continues to win, it's probably the right thing to do. It probably means that Kevin O'Connell, who I think we all agree knows a little thing about quarterback play, if they stick with Wentz, it means that he's decided to stick with Wentz because he's the head coach of the team. And it means he thinks it's the right thing to do. I just tend to believe him. I don't know. That doesn't sound crazy to me. I feel like I've been gaslit a lot here over the last few days. You're reading this wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, what? KFT just continuing to hammer me on this about Wentz, acting like Wentz turned around the team. Yeah, I mean, look, there's other podcasts if you want. I don't know. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. The guy played a good football game. They won by 30-8. Like, their offense was super efficient. The guy got praised up and down by his teammates, his head coach. The tape was good and his receivers caught the ball in time. I don't know what do you want me to do? You want me to just tell you he was terrible in this 48-10 victory? If that's what you want, there's gotta be a podcast. There has to be a podcast of someone saying that. So, this is probably the moment where I've had enough, and that's how it's probably going to be a lot this week. And going forward with this situation is I can only take so much. That's probably how it's going to be for live streams, is like, once I reach that point, it's just like, all right, it's clear we just can't move on with this. So I'm just going to talk about a few other things that you guys asked and then get to the Ahmad Hicks discussion, because you are just BSing me if you're saying, oh, this guy's saying Wentz is the greatest quarterback of all time. Like, you just, what? Come on. That's clearly not what I'm saying. You know, it's like I'll sit here and break it down 50 different ways with a bunch of data points, break down the PFF grade, everything I saw on tape. And then you're like, why don't you just marry him then? Why don't you just grow up? Sean says, best example for Dallas Turner is Hunter versus Griffin. Hunter was smart enough when to push for the pressure and the sack, tempering it with hesitancy so it takes away the quarterback's screenplay, while Griffin took a while to learn. Yeah, I think that neither one of those guys are kind of similar to Dallas Turner from a physical perspective. Like, I see what you're kind of getting at there with those two in their development, because Everson Griffin was a guy who was a 4th round draft pick who was a physical freak and needed to learn the game and took a little time for that. Again, imagine letting a player develop. How many times do I need to talk about this? Like Quentin Johnston, I watch him look really good for the Chargers, and I'm like, we're allowed to let somebody develop, my friends. It can happen. Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter, great examples of guys who develop. So even though they're different from Dallas Turner, I see where you're getting at, where both of those guys came into the league with a lot of physical talent and they had to learn the game. They had B-Rob there who helped them work in, sound familiar? Who helped them work in Danielle Hunter. And then, by year 2, 3, he was really, really excellent. So, I do think that Dallas Turner, the reason that we gave him the benefit of the doubt with time is because now you're starting to see that progress. And when you see somebody who gets, a 5 pressure game and also is involved in stopping the run, like that's very impressive. Very impressive from Danielle Hunter, not Danielle Hunter's always impressive, from Dallas Turner. Very impressive in this game against Cincinnati. And I thought he was really good against Chicago. Now it's about doing it on a week-to-week basis, in large part because you might need him. If Van Ginkel's not 100%, you need to be able to say, okay, Dallas Turner, you might have to play for like 2 or 3 weeks and let Van Ginkel get back to 100% because he was only able to play a handful of snaps last week. And then here he is on the injury report again. While this team continues to be banged up, it might just have to be the case that he doesn't play very much or at all in these games over the next 2 weeks. And then here it is, Dallas Turner. So we thought we kind of made a big deal out of that Atlanta game. Like, oh, what an opportunity for, Dallas Turner in that game. We made that about like, this is his game. You take the mound with the ball, Dallas Turner, go pitch a perfect game or you're a bust. But then it doesn't really work that way because he's going to be a big part of the defense for the entire season. And we kind of need to weigh with the sample that we end up getting. And as that grows, then we'll see more of the full picture on Dallas Turner. Again, though, how old is he? We're talking 22. So I think you want to say more and more progress from him. A 5 pressure day is pretty good. Let me take a look at what he's done so far in total, because I think it may be 7 or 8 pressures for him so far this season. Let's see. Hasn't graded particularly well. I think coverage has been a big part of that. Pass rush, a 64 grade. So he's got 9 pressures in 44 pass rush snaps. That's a pretty good win rate right there. Last year he had 12. So he's already got 9 this season so far. And he has he's only missed the 1 tackle. That's part of it. Coverage has been something that he hasn't graded super well. It doesn't have a lot of targets though. So we'll see on just how that plays out in general. But 9 pressures through 3 games that's pretty solid. It's kind of where you wanted him to be. Mr. Mayer says KOC and the O-line didn't help, but you got to do better than bottom 3 in the league. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about like evaluating an individual game and trying to make a assessment of a player, no matter who it is. I was just saying that about Dallas Turner. Like we all treated Atlanta like it was the biggest game of his life. And if he didn't succeed, he was a loser and he didn't have a great game. And then the next week he comes out and is excellent. And you're like, well, that's football. That's kind of how it works sometimes. And I have no doubt that if JJ McCarthy had been able to play against Cincinnati, that they would have won and that you would have come out of it feeling a lot better about JJ McCarthy. But if we're talking about breaking down that individual game, we've got to live in reality about what happened in that actual game and live in reality about why the head coach would be talking so much about playing on time, anticipation, footwork, all the stuff when he's talking about Carson Wentz. And because those are the things that you have to master as you go along in your career as JJ McCarthy. And I think that he will. So I think a lot of stuff is being misconstrued that I'm saying because you just want to hear play McCarthy now or quit KOC. But I've seen a lot of quarterback play. I've seen Rodgers in his prime smoke the Vikings. I've seen Breeze. I saw a lot of Kirk Cousins, who was a really good quarterback, by the way. Saw a 14-win quarterback last year. Saw Mahomes. Seen Herbert. I've seen a lot of them play. It doesn't usually look like that. So sometimes somebody needs more time. I said it all last year about Turner, and everyone wanted to tell me, oh, he's a bust. Like, why don't we give him a little more time than 300 snaps? So this is a pretty consistent take for me, by the way, when it comes to this, of giving players time, giving their development. And I don't think that is any sort of hot take. So, anyway, if you didn't answer the FanDuel question of the day, that was about Jordan Addison. 42.5 yards on FanDuel. How many catches and yards in his return? Make sure that you answer that question. Had a lot of very similar answers. A lot of very similar ballpark of 50 to 70 kind of yards for Addison. 4 or 5 catches. I think that would get him back into the mix and be a good contribution. And it certainly gives Wentz another option if he doesn't want to throw to a double team Justin Jefferson. A huge help getting back Jordan Addison for this game. Anyway, so appreciate the conversation. And I had a chance to get together with Ahmad Hicks from Fox 9, also does a podcast as well. And whenever I get together with Ahmad, what we usually do is 9 questions. So some of these will be about the quarterback situation. Some of these will be about the rest of the team, the NFC North, the NFC, and so forth. It's kind of rapid fire at Ahmad. So we'll put a wrap on the night with my conversation with Ahmad Hicks. So thanks everybody for joining, and here we go. All right, we welcome into the show Ahmad Hicks from Fox 9, and we've had a lot of fun doing this in the past where I come up with 9 questions to rapid fire at you, Ahmad. Also want to mention that you've got a very cool podcast coming out. Your podcast Must Be Two Sides. You're going to have Eric Kendricks on your show. Yeah. So welcome back. Congratulations on that interview. I'm sure that fans will want to find that. So where's the best place to find the Kendricks interview?
You can go to youtube.com and just type in Must Be Two Sides podcast. It's with myself and my buddy, Michael Pruitt. He's a draftee of the Minnesota Vikings from that 2015 draft class with Eric Kendricks, Stephon Diggs, Danielle Hunter, just to name a few. So we talked about that draft class and a little bit more. So I hope you guys check it out.
He was actually, if I'm not mistaken, drafted before Stephon Diggs.
Yes,
right?
I'm sorry. Yes, he was. The year before, we talked about that. But then, yes, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah. So anyway, wasn't it let me look this up. Now I'm confused. In the same draft, he was taken before, like in the same round, I think, right? If I'm not mistaken here. He was in the 5th round and they took him first and then they took Diggs.
Yes.
That's how it went.
So
okay.
It was all of them in the same class. Yes. Eric Kendricks was the 2nd pick after Trey Waynes.
Yes. Yeah. But then that's the funny thing about the draft, right? Is that Diggs becomes, the big superstar, Minneapolis Miracle guy. Like, who could ever predict the draft is kind of the point. Anyway, well, I got a bunch of questions for you. So make sure everybody goes and checks that out, as well as your phenomenal coverage on Fox 9. But why don't we start out with the most obvious place to begin, Ahmad, which is the quarterback situation. Here's what I want to know. First of 9 questions. How many starts do you think Carson Wentz will make for the Minnesota Vikings this year?
As of right now, 3. I'm going 3. I think he gets the start against the Steelers. I think he gets the start against the Browns. And I think you have no choice but to go back to JJ McCarthy. Just my hunch. I just feel like if you're ever going to see what you have in your quarterback, you got to do it now. Because if you keep delaying it, pushing it off to next year, we keep having the same storyline every year.
Okay, this actually pairs with question 1 and 2. So why don't we just bunch those together? Because the second question is, how many games would they need to win to justify Wentz starting over JJ McCarthy? Because if you look at, the next 2 games are winnable in Ireland and London. If they win those 2 games, then it is hard to tell Carson Wentz, sorry, pal, but they do come back and they play against the Philadelphia Eagles. If that doesn't go well, then are you considering starting McCarthy on a Thursday night against the Chargers? Like, it's not the easiest thing to figure out if they win these next 2 games.
Right. Yeah, I know it's a very, very tough decision for Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Look, Carson Wentz was a starter in the National Football League, hasn't been a starter for a very long time. I think that speaks volumes to why he's been a backup. You know what I'm saying? So even if he is given multiple opportunities, we don't know what we're going to get from Carson Wentz. We saw him go out and orchestrate a team, well, lead a team to victory when his defense had 5 takeaways. Can you do that when your team doesn't have 5 takeaways? So I think, like a lot of Minnesota fans do, they jump to conclusions really fast after one game. They're like, all right, this is our guy. Let's go see him have to lead this team down to win a game. Like outside of the first drive, can you do that consistently? And I think if he plays well, like in games in the Steelers and the Browns, and he has like 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, all right, now there's a legitimate case for him to be the starting quarterback. But I just think that, right now it's JJ McCarthy's team, and Carson Wentz is just doing what he's asked to do.
I think that skepticism is reasonable when it comes to Carson Wentz because, as you mentioned, his recent history is mostly as a backup quarterback. But I have to say that I am influenced in my thoughts on this by what happened last year, where most of the world thought that Sam Darnold was going to win 6 or 7 games, and then he ends up winning 14. I think it does come to a little bit of a bigger question about Kevin O'Connell and his offense, and just whether this offense can be run by a brand new quarterback. It kind of reminds me a little bit of San Francisco throwing Trey Lance in there and then being like, we want the athletic quarterback. Oh no, we want the game manager, right? Like turn around the car. We did the wrong thing. So I don't know where this is going to go with Wentz and how well he's going to play because it was kind of a unique game where Isaiah Rodgers gets them up by so much that he didn't have to really put a lot on his shoulders. But I do think there might be something to be said for the challenge of running this offense where it's not like Kevin O'Connell makes life easy for his quarterback.
Right. And you know what I'm saying? Like we saw what he was able to do a couple of years ago with Josh Dobbs coming in and having to get him up to speed and whatnot. But I think you're at your best as a play caller and as a head coach when you have someone that fully understands and trusts your system and knows where to go with the football. Like I think we saw a bare minimum thing for Carson Wentz in the game this past weekend. Like he wasn't asked to do a lot. You know what I'm saying? So can you get to those second, third, and fourth reads and things like that? Can you identify where blitzes are coming from and where to shift your offensive line? So, I think you kind of got to go with the guy that's been around, but I'm not sold on JJ McCarthy just like everybody else, but I'm not willing to just push him to the side yet and be like, this isn't the guy of the future. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if you're bailing on JJ McCarthy after 2 games, that would be foolish. And it would be foolish for the Vikings as well. I think what it comes down to is question number 3, actually, which is the trust level of Kevin O'Connell to manage the way through this quarterback situation. So I gave you for the bit here to put it on a 1 to 10 confidence level of O'Connell working his way through this, because I do think that if you're a coach and he's not on the hot seat or anything like that, but you want to win, you want to get to the playoffs, and developing a quarterback on the fly while you're trying to win with a great team doesn't exactly gel as much as it does to have a veteran game manager. So that's where I think it becomes tricky for him. So your confidence in Kevin O'Connell managing his way through this quarterback situation?
10. I think he's a quarterback whisperer. I think Daniel Jones wanted to come here for a reason. I think Sam Darnold wanted to come to Minnesota for a reason. I think Carson Wentz wanted to come here for a reason. We asked him that prior to his first start, and he said, hey, look, I'm still learning, about Kevin O'Connell's, level of genius and getting quarterbacks ready in such a short amount of time. So I think these guys put a lot of trust in him, and I'm giving him a 10 because, Matthew, he was a former quarterback that didn't make it. And he's come out on the record and said, like, look, I would have been more successful as a quarterback in the National Football League if I had a coach that believed in me. If I had a coach that would tell me, hey, you're doing okay, this is what I want you to do better, instead of just putting you down, how kind of the NFL was back in the day. It was very cutthroat, very blunt. You're not good. You're not meant for this business. You know what I'm saying? So I just think that Kevin O'Connell's ability to put himself and his players' shoes and understand the struggles they may be going through or the challenges they may have and reading defenses and whatnot, he can always dumb it down for them and things like that. So my confidence in KOC is a 10, I think, because he was in these shoes. He's walked their path before, and he kind of knows how to get the best out of his quarterbacks. And he said it first. He said, I think the NFL and organizations fail young quarterbacks more than young quarterbacks fail the organizations.
Right. And that's where the hard part for Vikings fans might be if Kevin O'Connell lands on the conclusion that regardless of how Wentz is playing, that McCarthy needs more time. That is, I think, very disappointing to Vikings fans because he was presented as being ready to start this year to us,
Yeah.
to the fans. And I mean, look, you and I were out there watching Sam Howell all summer being like, they're not even challenging JJ McCarthy for this job. So why would anyone think that suddenly Carson Wentz would show up? But it's hard to figure it out watching training camp for anybody, for the coaches, for the teammates, for us. And in those first two games, some of those key markers were not matching up of getting the ball out on time. And the thing that I wonder if what O'Connell thinks about this is McCarthy has now had two injuries and he's played a grand total of what, including preseason, like 4 games. I mean, and he's had 2 injuries. Do you want him out there if he can't protect himself because he's holding onto the ball too long? But then at the same time, Ahmad, I do buy when people are talking about, hey, they didn't have Christian Darrisaw and it wasn't maybe the best game plan and they didn't lean onto the run game to help him out. So I think that there has to be some evaluation, but also maybe some reflection as well. If you're going to bring him back in, there has to be more easy button stuff for him and he has to be protected better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that, people outside of us, I feel like don't understand watching the Vikings is they didn't have Christian Darrisaw the first 2 weeks. They also didn't have the guy who JJ McCarthy built a connection with during training camp in Jordan Addison. Now you're talking about you're going to have Christian Darrisaw back. You're going to have Jordan Addison back. So now you're going to have that full offensive line, especially when Donovan Jackson returns from his wrist injury, hopefully around the same time as JJ McCarthy. Now you're talking about he has all of his weapons. He has his head coach, his play caller. There are no excuses now. You know what I'm saying? And so I think we should give him a fair shake with the 5 guys up front because, look, you can have all the pieces you want. You can have Kevin O'Connell. You can play bad opponents. But if you don't have a good left tackle in the National Football League, you're going to be in trouble regardless of who plays quarterback. And that's why Carson Wentz was sacked so many times.
Yeah, no, and I think Wentz also himself needed to get rid of the ball a couple of those times too, and was trying to make a play or two off a schedule that is maybe not in his repertoire these days, like it was back in 2017 when he had not been in the league for so long and accrued all the injuries and so forth. But we can't really figure it out unless we see it. But they also can't really put him back in if they're winning. And I think O'Connell has his work cut out and will earn that very large paycheck throughout the rest of this development process for JJ McCarthy as they go forward. But I don't think anyone would say it's a good idea to just write it off that McCarthy could come back in and play well. Next question it pertains to the game this week that the Vikings are playing that is so much focus on the quarterback situation, but we know who's starting against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We also know who's starting for the Steelers, which would be Aaron Rodgers. Over under on FanDuel for Aaron Rodgers is 202.5 yards against this vaunted Vikings defense. Do you think that Aaron Rodgers goes over or under 202.5 yards, Ahmad?
Man, it's tough, Matthew. I feel like he borders that. I'm going to say under because I feel like the Vikings defense is playing out of this world. Especially Jalen Redmond. You're talking about a backup interior defensive lineman demanding so much attention from the interior offensive line on opposing teams. I just think they have so many guys to get after the quarterback. We haven't even really talked about the absence of Blake Cashman because the front line has been playing so well. And then you insert Harrison Smith back into the secondary and Isaiah Rodgers doing what he did last week and that confidence. I mean, I don't see Calvin Austin or DK Metcalf or Pat Freiermuth just torching this defense. So I'm going to have to take the under on this one.
The interesting stat for Aaron Rodgers so far that I've noticed is according to PFF, he has just 2 big-time throws so far this year and 5 turnover-worthy plays, which is the 7th most in the NFL. And they have him graded as the 2nd worst starting quarterback in football right now, right? Which, I think with his traditional statistics hasn't been bad. 586 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. But a lot of that came against the Jets in that first game. A lot of screen passes to DK Metcalf, a couple of wide open throws. We just haven't seen Aaron Rodgers look like a top-notch quarterback since probably 2021. And yet people keep talking themselves into the idea that that's the case. The one concern I guess I would have is if they can get some of the Arthur Smith play action stuff going. The Vikings run defense was much better last week. I just don't buy Aaron Rodgers these days and what's left of him outside of the every once in a while, whoa, he's still got the arm. But when they pressure him, I think he's going to look slower than Jake Browning.
Yeah, I honestly that's my thing. Like he can't really extend plays, and if he does, it's only for 2 seconds. Like I don't know if you guys watched the tape of Dallas Turner last week, but that closing speed, my goodness, he looked like a running back hunting down Jake Browning. So look, Aaron Rodgers, I think, is going to be on the move quite a bit this game, and I think Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, those guys are going to have a field day when you talk about a non-mobile quarterback in Aaron Rodgers.
His PFF grade when pressured this year is 27.4, which is absolutely horrific. Yeah, right. So if he's not getting rid of the ball quickly, he is in a lot of trouble. I do think that every once in a while, when you have an old wily vet, that they can find something. But the way he looked even for the Jets last year against this defense didn't look like he was seeing it that great. Speaking of this defense, the next question I have on my list here is, how good are they really, considering the schedule, considering all the different stars that they're going to face going forward, but also how they've played so far? Where are they going to rank, Ahmad? Like, how good do you think that the Vikings defense will end up being, let's just say in points against, the thing that matters the most at the end of the year?
They'll be a top 10 defense. I think they'll be a top 10 defense, especially with the teams that they end the season with. You know, I think they have a gauntlet coming up after that bye, like a 4 or 5 week stretch where it's brutal, but then it kind of levels out a little bit after that. So I think they'll be able to kind of like balance things out if they do give up a lot of points to the Chargers, Eagles, Ravens, but I think they still be a top 10 defense. I mean, you're talking about, look at that front seven on paper. That's one of the best front sevens in the National Football League. Harrison Smith, future Hall of Famer. Josh Metellus, borderline all pro and Pro Bowl safety, linebacker, whatever you want to call him. And then Isaiah Rodgers, Brian Murphy, coming into their own. Like, I absolutely think they can be a top 10 defense. And I think maybe their average points given up each week under 20. I think that's what they'll end the season with, under 20.
What is your swing factor for that? I think for me, I mean, you mentioned Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez, the way that those guys have played on the interior. I think that it's probably two people for me. You mentioned Dallas Turner. That's a big one. If he plays, I mean, he's off to a really good start, but if he plays at an exceptional level and continues to grow through the rest of the season, that becomes the deepest, nastiest front seven, or at least up there in the NFL. And then I'm going to throw Isaiah Rodgers out there as well. Okay, he's not going to do this every single week. Isaiah, just go score 2 touchdowns in the first half every single game. But, if he continues to play at a high level, then that solidifies that unit to where they don't really have a weak point. If he is kind of a flash in the pan one big week and then it's inconsistency after this, then I think there's still going to be some questions. I would also throw out Jeff Okudah as a question anytime that he's on the field. So I know I just kind of named everything, but like, what's the one that has your attention the most?
Jeff Okudah. I think that's I won't say biggest question mark for this team, but you see, like, every game that he's played in, he's been somewhat nicked up. Like, he's had a concussion, he's gotten up slow after a couple of tackles, but when he comes on the field, when like another team trots out 4 wide receivers and the Vikings go dime or they go nickel and Jeff Okudah has to come out there on that field and Byron Murphy goes inside and he's spread out outside against an X or a Z, can you hold up? Can you hold your own water? We saw Isaiah Rodgers do that on a fade ball with T. Higgins, where he not only was running step for step with him, he turned and found the ball, then he was able to get a PBU. Can Jeff Okudah do that consistently? I think that's going to be the deciding factor on this defense, especially when you start talking about good quarterbacks with good wide receivers and being able to test the Brian Flores defense and a quarterback not being confused by all the different looks they're seeing and knowing where to go with the ball. That means your corners have to play tight man-to-man coverage. That's what Jeff Okudah was brought here to do. So want to see him do better, want to see him be consistent. I think if he's consistent, you talk about a defense going from top 10 to top 5. I think he has that much of an impact on this defense when you're talking about the dime and nickel play. Offensively, I'm going to go with Jordan Mason. I'm going to go with Jordan Mason because he's going to be the bell cow for the next 2 games for the Minnesota Vikings, or 3 games, should I say. Aaron Jones hasn't missed 4. But I think he's going to be the bell cow. I think he has a lot of burst that people didn't know about. He has a lot of toughness. Like, he is a bruiser, but I think he also has some wiggle that people don't give him enough credit for. So I think that the Vikings need to make him a focal point moving forward. No, I'm not saying bench Aaron Jones because Kevin O'Connell said it during training camp. It's going to be a 1A, 1B. And I think what he brings to the receiving game is tremendous. But I think you need a back that's going to beat down a defensive line and linebackers and then let a Aaron Jones come in and burst one for 40 to 50 yards. You know what I'm saying? So Jordan Mason, Jeff Okudah, those are my 2 guys that I think need to have huge seasons for the Vikings to have success.
I don't mind if when Aaron Jones comes back, it's more of a 1 and 2. With the way Mason has played. I mean, look, time comes for everybody, and Jones didn't look like he had the same burst. Now he's going to be coming off of a hamstring injury. His receiving ability, his leadership, I would throw his pass protection in there. I think that's ahead of where Jordan Mason is at this time in his career. All that stuff's important. Also, they're going to get CJ Ham back to give them a little pass pro on third downs if they need that. But the way that Mason looks running the football to me is exceptional. It's top notch. It's finding holes. It's seeing the game extremely well. I think that his eyes probably are something I would give him a lot of credit for. We see his girth and how tough it is to tackle, but he spotted holes and picked out places to go in that outside zone that was so impressive during this game against Cincinnati and really all year long. I think he has the possibility of being one of the best backs in the NFL. So you want to ride that and then work back Aaron Jones in. But, you know, it's a great point that Mason has been a game changer for this offense. I don't know where they would be if it was last year or 2 years ago with the running game, especially 2 years ago. So how about this for the next question? I think this is number 6. It's a question. 6. What has been your biggest surprise this year so far for the Vikings that is not the quarterback position? Because of course, I don't think any of us thought we'd be saying Wentz v. Rodgers in Ireland, but something that maybe when you and I were watching camp or as you were going through the off season, and now that it's come to fruition, you're like, oh, did not expect that.
That's a good question, Matthew. That's tough. Because I feel like offensively, we kind of expected ups and downs. Like, I kind of predicted that I felt like the offense would struggle weeks 1 through 8 and that the defense would have to carry the load. Okay, this is very, very nitpicky. But I will say outside of the Bengals game, just a little inconsistency from the defense in stopping the run. I think that DJ Swift showed a couple of flashes in game 1, Caleb Williams getting outside of the pocket, and then Bijan Robinson and all those guys going for 200 plus yards on them. That's been the one area where I'm surprised by that, because with Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, and, you know, Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel setting the edges, and then Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman, like I didn't expect the Vikings to give up a 100-yard rusher this early in the season, yet alone a 200-yard rushing game against the Atlanta Falcons. So that's been the one thing that surprised me, and they got it corrected versus the Bengals. Josh Metella said that's something they can't do. But I think if they want to be successful, if they want to get to all their trick plays, their gadgets, and do all that creative stuff that Brian Flores is known to do, you have to be able to stop the run. I think they've been a little inconsistent in that. They showed what they can do versus the Bengals, but now you need to go show that each and every week.
Yeah, and I think they really missed Cashman against the Atlanta Falcons. The area where that could be, I think, taped over is having a rotation with 2 younger players who have been really good against the run so far when they've been out there. And now Brian Flores has to kind of figure out, how do you mix and match when you have 2 of the best interior rushers and teams pass a lot on first down, but at the same time, these other 2 guys are stopping the run. And even we've seen Redmond get after the passer. I mean, he has looked like a certified beast in there with his quickness and strength. So it's, you know, a good problem to have for them. But I think those guys could be the players that take it to a different level of the run game that maybe didn't play as much against the Falcons and could end up playing more. I would say, you want to talk about getting deep in the weeds for biggest surprise. I think Ryan Wright's been awesome. I honestly think I'm not kidding, man. I think he kept him in the Falcons game. I think he was great against Cincinnati and Chicago, except for maybe one punt. He has been holding that football, which we heard a lot from Matt Daniels. No, I mean, overall, I just say this. The special teams over the last couple of years has been a snoozer. It has not been great punting. Last year, overall, at the end of the year, they're not one of the best field goal kicking teams, even though they had streaks of being great. And they were certainly not a good returning team. And now, a guy who was an undrafted free agent, who apparently didn't even get a signing bonus, according to Matt Daniels, has come in and given them a weapon in the return game. And Ryan Wright is punting more confidently, and Will Reichert is hitting 62-yard field goals. And in this world right now, where the kick return is happening 75% of the time, and field position is, I think, a different battle, because you're talking about asking punters to cough and corner all the time. You're asking kickers to kick from 60 all the time. It's a big deal if you're playing well on special teams.
It is. Special teams is like they always say, Matthew, complementary football. Can't win games that the offense and defense don't complement special teams, vice versa. So Miles Price, huge addition. Oh my goodness. Like, we saw flashes during training camp of his receiving ability, but once he got in that game and the injury happened to Rondale Moore and he was finally given some opportunities, we are like, whoa. Like, this kid's kind of good. Like, he has some bursts, he has some wiggle. And like you said, it's exciting with all the returns in the game nowadays. You need someone who can kind of shift that momentum or give you some momentum when your offense is coming on the field. So love what Miles Price is doing. You're right. You hit the nail on the head with Ryan Wright. He's been doing really good this season when called upon. And Will Reichert, booting field goals. So I think if the special teams can keep playing the way that they are and the defense can keep playing the way they are, JJ McCarthy will have some time to grow. That's my hunch.
Okay, so 3 questions remaining here for you.
Okay.
What opponent coming up is the most intriguing for you, Ahmad?
Can I list 4? Like,
no, you can't. There's a lot. I agree. There's a lot. It's which
okay.
opponent, not which 4 opponents.
I'm gonna go the Chargers. The Chargers. I think they have the blueprint of how to be successful in the NFL. Coach Harbaugh is doing a phenomenal job with Justin Herbert. Got Omari and Hampton running the ball well. Justin Herbert getting it out to his receivers, and they're playing great defense. They have 3 division wins to start the season. And so I think, are they going to continue that momentum? You're talking about going to Los Angeles and playing them on Thursday night football, primetime game. So who's going to be the starter for that game? Is it Carson? Is it JJ? Will they be able to perform under the bright lights? And so I think that's a very intriguing matchup, because you're going on the road. If you can win that game, beat a quality opponent, maybe a front runner in the AFC right now, I think that gives you a lot of momentum. But if you lose that game, then you got to look at the rest of your slate and kind of be like, all right, well, can we really compete against the best teams in the National Football League? So that's the game. That's the opponent that I'm circling where, you know what, they got to show up.
I love that pick. I think I circled that as the toughest game on the schedule. You know, like when you play 18 holes and you look at the scorecard and it says 1, like this is the toughest hole on the course. That to me is the toughest hole on the course. I would say for intrigue, Vikings and Lions at Ford Field, the House of Horrors recently during the Kevin O'Connell era, where if we go through the last couple of years, it has not gone very well at Ford Field, especially last year. So can they actually get a win there against Dan Campbell's team, which suddenly looks very strong? That leads me to the next question, which is Packers, Lions. Who is the tougher competition for the Vikings going down the stretch?
Lions. Their offense is too explosive, man. I mean, they got weapons all over. Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, David Montgomery got, 12, 13 carries the other day and still managed 2 touchdowns to go over 100 yards. Like, their offensive line was a question mark heading into the season, and they're just creating holes for these 2 running backs to run through. Jared Goff has all the time in the world, didn't get sacked versus the Baltimore Ravens. Like, look, I know the Packers, they have a lot of hype surrounding them. Micah Parsons is there. He's made their defense a little bit better, but there's still a lot of question marks with that offense. Like, yeah, you have Josh Jacobs, but is Jordan Love consistent? Is Matthew Golden a true number 1 wide receiver? Can Romeo Doubs hold his own later in the season? Like, I think those are a lot of unknowns, whereas the Lions, their whole problem last year was injuries defensively. Those guys are getting healthy, and they still have the same offense. They just don't have the same offensive coordinator. So I think that's the problem. And like you said, going to Detroit has been a horror story for the Vikings recently. And you got to go there to win, especially if you want to be good in the playoffs. So I'm going to have to go with the Lions because they've been there before. They've had more success recently, and they still have all of their guys, whereas the Packers are still trying to figure things out. They just got Micah Parsons. So it's a flashy, shiny object, and everyone is, obsessing and drooling over that.
I do think the Packers defense will continue to be very legit. They have been phenomenal. If JJ McCarthy is the one going to Lambeau, which is also, on the slate, that might be pretty darn tough, as we saw how much Detroit struggled there. But it tends to be the case that offense is a little more consistent than defense from a week to week basis. And I think that you're right. And also that Detroit's defense has started to show up the last couple of weeks where they got off to a really rough start. And if the Packers offensive line looked like they did against Cleveland, against the Vikings, Jordan Love's going to have a really, really long day. So Love to me has not shown an ability, and their receivers, their line, to be consistent week in and week out, even giving all credit to Cleveland. So I might lean ever so slightly Detroit as well, but I think this one's about as close as it gets. Let me look here. I'm curious about the betting market. The betting market has Green Bay to win the NFC plus 400 and Detroit plus 800. So they're not as sold on Detroit after those couple of wins, which is interesting.
That's surprising.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought that there would be much gap at all between those two.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so here's the final question for you. There's a couple of teams in the league. Amazing how this goes in the NFL, right? We've gone this far, and there's only a couple teams in the NFL that are 3-0. I think we all are buying the Buffalo Bills at 3-0 because they're a legit Super Bowl favorite. But there's some other teams that maybe their 3-0 is a little sus, and that would be the Indianapolis Colts, the Tampa Bay Bucks, and the San Francisco 49ers, whose 3-0 is the most legitimate of those three teams. I love the thought you're putting into this. I
know
it.
Because I wanted to say the Indianapolis Colts, but I'm like, I don't love their division. And I think a couple of their wins were kind of just like easier wins. I'm going to have to go Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they've beaten some quality opponents. I think they have the pieces to be a really good football team, especially because, you talk about like a team that was kind of shaped around Tom Brady, then a lot of those guys still remaining, still lingering around. Chris Godwin hasn't even been out there. He's going to be coming back this week. And so their offense is just going to get even more explosive. Bucky Irvin, former University of Minnesota running back, starting for them, and then Rashee Wright, as a backup. Like, come on now, like that's a lot of firepower. So I think they're legitimate. And you're talking about a former number one overall quarterback finally living up to the billing and playing up to his potential. So I think they have a lot of confidence, and I think confidence is key in the NFL. If you're a confident group, you can go out there and achieve anything. So I'm going to have to go with the Buccaneers. I think that 3-0 start is very legitimate, and it's impressive.
Very interesting that the starting quarterbacks of these teams are all former high draft picks who maybe didn't get enough time to develop, possibly, or possibly were thrown into the fire a little too early. I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying that that happens sometimes in the National Football League. In fact, it happens all the time. I think that, so you mentioned the wins for Indianapolis. I agree. They beat Miami, they beat Tennessee, and but their rest of their division, the Jags, just not impressive. Tennessee's going to be a free win for them later. The Texans are just not who we thought they were going to be 2 years ago, and that could lead them to being better, where I think that the NFC West is tough. The Bucks, the unfortunate part, if they were 100% healthy, I'd say, hey, that's a Super Bowl contender. They're really banged up right now. So they might go through it a little bit early in the season, but I think that they are a real Super Bowl contender as we go down the stretch when they get people back, because Mike Evans hurt. Their offensive line is completely shredded apart, and they found a way to win some games. But San Francisco and Tampa Bay's wins haven't been nearly as impressive as Indianapolis. So I think I would pick Indy and make that tentatively because we just don't know what's coming next. Folks, make sure you go check out the Must Be Two Sides podcast interview with Ahmad, Michael Pruitt, former Viking, and you're having Eric Kendricks on the show. That's awesome. You also do a podcast with Henry Lake, who's a great friend of mine. Fox 9 coverage. You're doing a lot, man. I love to see it. Love to see you out there at TCO as well, covering the Vikings. So great stuff. I love this bit. I want to keep doing it every once in a while. So I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Man, thanks for having me on your platform. I really appreciate it. You've done a tremendous job. I mean, to go from radio to full-time podcaster, I don't think people know how hard that is. I think a lot of people think anybody can pick up a microphone and broadcast it to people and start making money and create a living off of it, but it's not that easy. And I'm learning that firsthand. So shout out to you and the platform that you've created, the audience that you've built. You're doing a tremendous job, and I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, once I got the camera, microphone, and lighting, the rest was easy after that. That was the hardest part,
Right.
and a lot of trial and error there. So, well, I appreciate the kind words, and we'll see you very soon, man.
All right, Matthew, take care.